Welcome, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Nothing is wrong with your ABM strategy, but your execution is failing. Presented by Conversica and Martech. I'm your host, Cynthia Ramsaran. Before we begin, if you have any audio issues, click the screen to enable your audio. If you have any viewing issues, you can use the Q&A section at any time to communicate with us. You can send questions directly to the speakers about their presentation at any time. Without further ado, let's get to the presentation. Joining us today is Drew Nicer, founder of Renegade and CMO Huddles. He will be moderating the panel discussion later on. And also joining us are Sonny Dasgupta, head of product marketing at Conversica, John Russo, CMO and founder of B2B Fusion, and James Stanton, vice president of marketing at Empyrean. Welcome, Drew. I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Cynthia. Hi, I'm delighted to share with you the findings of the 2021 State of Account-Based Marketing Report that my agency Renegade conducted on behalf of Conversica. I will be presenting some of the highlights, and then we will move into a more in-depth discussion of the implications with James Stanton, John Russo, and Sonny Dasgupta. First of all, let's go through a little background on the research. Let me get to that slide. There we go. Our goal was to identify the current state of the relationship between sales and marketing, quantify the impact of MarTech and specifically ABM on this relationship, and identify any gaps and opportunities. To get at these issues, the survey was fielded in July and August 2021 among 227 respondents who either worked in sales or marketing. These individuals worked across more than 20 industries and at various levels in their organization. 40% were at the manager level and 60% were at a director or higher level. 74% of those surveyed worked at companies with at least 100 million in annual revenue, and 80% worked at companies with at least 1,000 employees. Because we were seeking to understand the impact of ABM on the sales and marketing relationship, all of the respondents had to be engaged in ABM, which we defined in the screener broadly as currently selling to a defined target or account. Okay, so let's get to it. The sales and marketing divide has shifted. One of the interesting findings in this report is that the traditional divide between sales and marketing has shifted. In the bad old days, marketing would be quick to blame sales for not following up on their great leads, while sales would dismiss the quality of these so-called great leads. And while no doubt this divide still exists in many companies, those who have adopted an account-based marketing approach have witnessed a new level of detente, if not downright cooperation and mutual respect between sales and marketing. The finger pointing, for the most part, has stopped. ABM has essentially brought sales and marketing together, and some thought this would never happen. That said, it is important to recognize that the divide has shifted. The conflict has moved from a strategic issue to an executional one. There is so much data and just not enough time, it seems, for sales to deliver the level of personalization that marketing expects. So let's break this down a little bit more. We're going to look at the current state in 4 areas. There's a shared belief in ABM, surprising harmony, remnants of the old divide, and the big new challenge. Believe in ABM's ability. This research revealed a remarkable consensus around ABM as a strategic approach. 87% of all those surveyed believe in ABM's ability to convert more pipeline. 86% believed in ABM's ability to close more deals, and 83% believe in ABM's ability to deliver intent data. If you were wondering if these folks are neophytes and just excited about the latest bright, shiny MarTech object, then guess again. 3 out of 4 of those surveyed have been working with ABM for at least 3 years. In MarTech years, that's kind of like dog years, that makes them serious experts. Let's move on to surprising harmony. One of the real shockers in this research was a seemingly newfound respect between the departments. For example, 81% of both groups believe that sales is doing everything they can to close deals. I really never thought I'd ever hear that. These are not exactly the fighting words you would have heard just a few years ago. And here's another shocker. 77% of salespeople believe marketing drives quality leads. Wait, what? Let me repeat that. 77% of salespeople believe marketing drives quality leads. Is this the sign of the apocalypse? We don't think so, especially when you consider that 76% of these same salespeople believe marketing is doing all they can to enable sales to close deals. Wow, this level of harmony was certainly not expected and relegates the old divide to old school companies who may not have yet embraced ABM. Okay, let's move on to the next one. There are remnants of the old divide. Lest you think it's all hugs and kisses between these classic combatants, there were a couple of remnants. Specifically, marketers are 2 times more likely to point at a lack of cooperation with sales as the reason ABM isn't working. It's 40% versus 19%. And sales is a lot more confident that they are building awareness among targeted accounts than their marketing counterparts. But we really had to work to find these discrepancies, these disconnects. Relatively speaking, there's very few discrepancies in terms of the way they look at each other. And it's so different than it was in pre-ABM days. So what's the big new challenge? Where is the divide? In a word, personalization. While there is incredible consensus on the effectiveness of personalized communications, in fact, 96% of both groups believe personalized communications is to prospects are more effective than non-personalized. The problem is that personalized engagement isn't scaling. Personalization at scale is quite time consuming, and if done without automation, it's difficult. It's just plain difficult to do. Often this is due to an inability to use intent data in outreach or at various touch points. So let's look at this. This research was quite interesting here. We call this the personalization drop off. The issue of personalization at scale became particularly pronounced as you move through the funnel. While 68% of initial outreach to outbound sales prospects are personalized, you see a drop off to 58% on initial outreach to inbound leads. And then this decline continues to 48% for personalizing post first meeting outreach to drive early stage progression. And it drops again to 23% of post opportunity creation to drive middle stage progression. In other words, the deeper you get into the sales process, the less likely sales will be personalizing communications. The scaling personalization challenge. So where does this problem come to a head? Just over half believe the feasibility of personalization is the challenge. These folks are saying it's just not possible to personalize everything. And given all the data available, it's not surprising that 42% are simply overwhelmed by the amount of data available on their ABM platforms. And mirroring the drop off from the slide earlier, we learned that just 23% of salespeople say they personalize every touch. Underuse of intent data. Another interesting finding from this study relates to the underuse of intent data. While 67% of salespeople look at a prospect's website, 52% search Google, and 49% visit the LinkedIn profile. Only 40% use intent data gathered by ABM platforms. Again, we see this drop off. This is clearly a missed opportunity. In assessing this issue, the top barriers to sending personalized communications include the same sales team's understanding of how to use intent data effectively, sales is simply not having enough manpower, and marketing's ability to get the data right. The need for personalization at scale. The issue here is that despite the massive time investment, salespeople aren't personalizing their communications as often or as effectively as they would like. Now, why does this matter? On this slide, we show you how many touches in the research, how many on touches on average the folks we surveyed say it takes to get a first meeting. 77% said it more than 5, 44% said more than 10. And how many touches does it take to close a sale? 89 report say it takes at least 5 touches, and 40% note it takes 10 or more. That's a lot of touches and a lot of opportunities for personalization, and we know it's not happening at the scale that marketers would like and the salespeople can do. So the cost of manual personalization is an issue here. And in the research, we found that on average, each salesperson is spending 16.6 hours per week researching and creating personalized messages. That's over 47% of an average work week. Now, we made an approximate guess of salaries based on some of the research that we did elsewhere, just average at 100,000, including overhead. You figure that organizations are roughly spending $47,500 per rep on prospect research and message personalization each year. Now, if we could reduce that by 20% and then multiply it by, say, 20 sales reps, that's a big savings. But how do you personalize communications at scale? The answer is through a carefully crafted combination of people, process, and technology. Can move to the next slide. And at this point, it is time to make this a more interactive presentation. So we can turn on everybody's camera. Let's reintroduce James Stanton, VP of Marketing from and Comms at Empyrean, Sonny Dasgupta, pardon me. Hey, James. And John Russo. All right. Well done, gentlemen. Okay, well, we're going to start with James and we're going to focus first on people, of the people, process, and technology. So James Stanton, who is the Vice President of Marketing at Empyrean. James, hello. So in the survey, it shows that marketing and sales are aligned on strategy and the intent of ABM. First of all, are you seeing that in your organization? And while you're at it, could you share a little bit about Empyrean's ABM philosophy and approach?
Sure. Well, first, thank you, Drew. Thank you, Conversica, for pulling together really great research and this conversation today. Listening through that survey, I love those results. For me as a marketer, it really reinforces that now is such a great time to be a marketer. It's really exciting. I would say looking at Empyrean, our sales and marketing teams are definitely aligned. And we do have the benefit here of being aligned organizationally. So I'm part of a team that includes sales and product. So really our whole go-to-market is under one roof. But I think about ABM between marketing and sales. I feel like it's created this like spiritual alignment, right? Because ABM is really that reflection of marketing and sales working together, right? That's kind of the philosophy in my book behind ABM. And as I look back in my career, there's always been a shared desire to work together, right? It's never been that sales and marketing didn't want to work together. But we kind of lacked the tools and the lexicon and the singular approach to be able to do it together, right? So that's what in past years has come to bear. And I really, at its base level, right, ABM is just about engaging at the account level, right? And it means that we're agreeing, right, on those accounts that we want to pursue together, uncovering those accounts that we want to pursue together. We're no longer looking at individual leads. We're looking at accounts. We're looking at opportunities, right, in Salesforce parlance. And then we're working together, kind of who owns which part of the touch, or if we're touching the prospect together, being able to see, what message have they received, opened, and which haven't they, right? So, again, ABM there's a lot of the discussion around the digital side of it, but I take more of a philosophical approach, which then rolls into content. It starts thinking about all the different ways we're using field marketing tactics as we roll out of the pandemic into next year.
So as you were hearing this part about the personalization, because you mentioned that you're focused on opportunities and a whole account, not an individual. How are you thinking about, as you're hearing that personalization, did that issue sort of resonate? And you went, oh, yeah, this is hard.
Oh, 100%, Drew. I mean, hyper personalization, right? That is the golden target, right? Being able to speak to an individual about their needs, understanding how they fit into the whole decision-making process, and then meeting them right where they're at, whether it's a sales conversation or it's an ad, that you're putting in front of them, or it's that PowerPoint deck that your product marketing team, pulled together for that specific moment. There's a ton of what's the word I like to orchestration, right? There's just a ton of orchestration that needs to happen. And I have it gives me night sweats, right? Is thinking of that giant matrix, right? Of all these different stages of the sales and marketing funnel and all these different roles and different types of accounts and industries. And you get this complex thing, tons and tons of little squares there to fill in. And how do we as, marketers enable our sales team and our own tactics to have that content and make those conversations resonate?
So, okay. So it continues to be this sort of ongoing, almost a holy grail, if you will, to be able to get there. Part of this is intent data. And that came through in the research that there's a lot of intent data. We know there's a lot of intent data, but I was actually surprised to see how low it was relative to other things in terms of information that sales was using. How is marketing using intent data right now at your org?
Yeah, no, I was sort of surprised by that too, because intent data can be really helpful. So, Mark, we have demand base, right? Call out to that platform. We did install it this year, so we're a few months into using it. But what's really great about demand base is that it helps give some intelligence, right, as to where you want to point your arrow, because we're able to set it up to listen, right, for the types of clients that we're interested in pursuing. And we're kind of able to put our ideal client profile in there. But what's also really interesting, and why I again like demand base and tools like it, is that the data becomes a common denominator between marketing and sales, right? So we've installed demand base, the widget, whatever you call it in Salesforce, for our whole team, right? So they're able to put on the blinders and look at their territories and see who's showing intent and interest at the moment in their territory, and that gets fed back, right? In the magic of the platform that then controls our spend and the messaging that we're putting out. So that kind of help. It's one of those tools that I think helps to build trust, and is probably, at least in this guy's humble opinion, one of the reasons why you're starting to see better sales and marketing, talking about being aligned, because we're all kind of staring at the same thing.
So, and I'm curious let's zero in on intent data. And I know you're early on your install with the demand base, but so is marketing using intent data in a different way than sales is? Maybe you could talk about how the teams are using this data right now.
Yeah, well, in some, again, philosophically as a marketer, right? I think that marketing has the ability to kind of be a salesperson, at a macro level, right? Whereas if you're a sales professional, you have your territory. So I think that we are actually if I think about it, using it in a similar fashion, and that, on my team, right, our digital team, we take a look at the data, and we use it to uncover ideas, right? We actually, came up with a campaign recently based on the spikes that we were seeing amongst our target audience in a certain keyword search, right? So, ding, 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 duh, Mr. Marketer, right? Captain Obvious, maybe that should be a campaign, right? So that's one way. And then for the sales team, right, like, it's kind of about, you've only got so much time in the day, right? So which accounts are worth spending time on, right? I'm working all these deals. There's a lot of time that goes in with all the activity I've got in flight. If I'm going to spend some time on trying to, work with our BDR and somebody new, let's at least, right, see if they're showing any intent online on our web property or elsewhere, for the things, the services and value we provide.
Right. I mean, you would think a salesperson would be looking at intent data really carefully and thinking, "Oh my God, that signal is so high. We got to
Yeah,
get on that."
yeah, and
And
that's what's great. Again, I think that's what's really great because, yes, it's a tool, right? But we are able to bring that right to the table and put it right into Salesforce, where the team spends their time. And that's, any of the tools there's other tools that we don't want to overemphasize that demand base is the only one out there, right? We have a social tool that we put into place that has a Salesforce side to it. There's a competitive intelligence tool, Clue, that we're just going live with. So it's kind of, marketing is able to meet the sales rep where they are, and that's again another part of the ABM philosophy in my book.
so, John, I know you have a different point of view, and we might as well just jump in on that in terms of the use of intent data. Go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, I think some of it overlaps with James, and I'm drawing off, like, we've had over 100 plus experiences with account-based marketing on a variety of different platforms, including demand-based and other platforms. And I think the way James described it is correct. I would go one step further in that if I'm in the role of an SDR or sales, I have more data that I'm trying to synthesize than I do have time. And what we're really trying to do is get time back for those functions. And I think as marketers, and I've been a former CMO for 10 years, and I'm guilty of this too, we really relish and enjoy the complexity of technology and naming conventions. So I think there's a use case of marketing and targeting on quote unquote intent data. But I know in the clients that we've brought it to and through, we don't really get into the process of how the sausage is made, meaning how the account is qualified. We involve them in that process. But once we involve them once, it's like their work is done. The outcome becomes exactly what James was talking about in terms of here are the priority accounts to go after. How they got there, it's a little less relevant for sales because they're just doing so much and they have so little time to do it in. And, I think the time issue too is also something that Conversica and others play really well into as well. That's kind of a second issue there. But on the primary issue, it's all about trying to save that time so they can maximize their productivity. And it may be a reason why on the survey, the sales side is not saying that they're really engaged in intent because they may not get involved in the inner workings as much, or they don't have the time to get into it like we do in marketing.
Well, thank you, John. Since we're going around the horn and you brought up Conversica, Sonny, do you want to weigh in at all on this conversation around intent data, usage of it, and so forth?
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was just like what James and John you talked about. I thought it was one of the most surprising thing that over 60% of folks don't use intent data during research, and to me, that data is the key to your success in delivering personalization. So it's extremely powerful to engage customer and improve that buying experience. So I found it very surprising. And, there are technologies, intelligent automation technologies like conversational AI. And I'm going to talk a little bit about conversational ABM, but how that technology can leverage the data and the execution gap we talked about, how it can mitigate that execution gap. So that's something we see smart companies are looking at.
And we're going to get to that, but we're going to go back to James for a second now. And so, James, we're starting to talk about it. Part of this depends, I think, on measurement, because, everybody sort of does whatever's measured gets done, as they say. So I'm curious how you're measuring right now the success of your ABM program. And again, it's early on. And then anything you plan to refine later on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of, I would say, change again in how marketers are going to prove ROI, right? And I can tell you about, again, from this guy's perspective, right? I think that the days of just following that happy lead down through to, success or not, right? MQL, SQL, like all of that. Honestly, I'm kind of, I don't even use that term, MQL anymore. I see it and I squash it in my own organization. I'm not saying it doesn't have value elsewhere, everywhere. But I like to look at success of ABM as measured on impact on the opportunity, right? And that impact can come in a variety of ways, right? It could be finding a new person to attach to that opportunity, right? It could be successfully leveraging a fantastic PowerPoint, right, that the product marketing team had queued up for you to use, and stage 3, nurture or something like that, right? So as we measure, our success, I always use the term impact, right? Because I never like to claim marketing. MQL, I feel like it was just like it's like a flag on the moon, right? We got this MQL, and now it's, here you go, sales. Like, please follow up on it, right? And if you don't, right, that's the old mentality, Drew, I think you were talking about. When you start to use the word impact, that again, kind of goes back to a shared philosophy. So we have some early stage dashboards that we've created on that we've built out. And it requires some replumbing in Salesforce that's happening right now, looking at the opportunity as the object, as opposed to the lead record and the contact record. So there's some structural changes we have to make to accomplish it. They're going to take a little bit of time to roll out.
Yeah, and by the way, thank you for mentioning the death of MQL, and I really do see that in a lot of the CMOs that I talk to and various other conversations. And the problem with MQL is simply, we're done. And so you stop there and say, look at all these MQLs, and it's really useless. It's just absolutely useless number. And it gets more marketers in trouble than it helps them. So I'm with you. Let's kill that right now. This might be the last webinar an MQL was ever mentioned. RIP. Okay. So that's a good place, I think, for us to sort of move from the people conversation of this. And let's get into the process implications of this research. And leading that charge will be John Russo, founder and CMO of B2B Fusion. We've already met John, but hey, John, great to see you.
Great to see you as well.
So how do highly effective organizations move from a disjointed approach to a unified sort of ABM strategy? Nice, easy question.
Exactly. Usually we like to start with the end in mind. And with the end in mind, typically we like to have a visual of what reporting looks like and what people want to be reporting outcome-wise, because it becomes a forcing function for everything else to fall behind. So once you really have a really solid understanding, and usually it's around volume, velocity of types of deals that you're impacting, the speed, the different areas that they're coming in the business, could be inbound, it could be partners, it could be outbound. Once you map all that out and get everybody kind of focused on the measurement side of things, it makes it a lot easier to have the subsequent conversations of, okay, we're trying to get to this outcome. What do we need to do to get there?
So we want to, but win is an outcome, not just a lot of sales and new customers.
Yeah. So it's very specific around, so in the account-based marketing world, there's tiering. So you'd want to start with, where are your tiered accounts? Why are you going after them? How are you going after them? What's the expectation, say, in 2022 to end the year? If you've tiered your accounts, let's call it across 3 categories, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. how many accounts in each of those categories? What's your hypothesis or your micro hypothesis to really go after? And from that, you can kind of backwards solve and do the revenue numbers. So it's more than just, hey, we're trying to hit this big revenue number. It's, we need to get this number of accounts. And those are typically lagging indicators. There's leading indicators that will help you get to the lagging indicators, which is the pipeline impact and the revenue throughput. So good examples of leading indicators would be engaged accounts, accounts that are showing interest that didn't show interest before. Or it could be a leading indicator, could be, hey, we're getting the technology in place, like James mentioned, to facilitate that kind of conversation. So there's a lot of leading indicators that eventually roll up to the lagging indicator. Unfortunately, a lot of executives are focused on the lagging indicators, which causes for a lot of friction of this alignment issue that you talk about.
Yeah. Well, and that's true in any context of any marketer's challenge. It's always, the focus is on revenue when there's a lot of things that have to get there. And it is, as you say, a lagging indicator. As you were talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and we didn't actually share that particular data, but we are talking about personalization. And one of the things the research showed, and it's not surprising, is the level of personalization declines by tier pretty quickly. And so you might have some salespeople who are personalizing tier 1, but they're just raising their hands and say, I can't do it with tier 2 and tier 3. I'm out of time. I can't. And I'm curious if that aligns with some of the things that you see out there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And you could go one step further and say there could be 3 different categories: a one-to-one ABM, a one-to-many, and in between, one-to-few. And the one-to-one, typically in larger companies, you're doing a heck of a lot of personalization and customization on both sales and marketing. The newer companies that we see on the SaaS side that are growing aggressively, that come up from demand gen roots, that have that MQL model, and we may agree to disagree on this, but I actually think the leads aren't quite dead yet. They may be less important, or they're not getting the oxygen that they need. So they may be dying, but they're not yet dead. But they could roll up, because a lot of these SaaS companies are used to the lead level model. And so they want to do the one-to-many as a strategy or an outreach. So they're a little bit more personalized there than they are in a pure demand gen world. In the pure demand gen world, just not enough personalization that's happening there at all, either on the sales or the marketing side.
Right. And by the way, right, well, even the one-on-one, it wasn't like 90% of one-on-one communications were personalized. It was like 90% of first touch person.
Yeah.
But it just, even at tier 1, it was declining very quickly. And by tier 3, was non-existent. I hear what you're saying about MQL. What I'm simply saying, and those leads certainly have a place to go, but for marketers to actually report in on them and put any value in those in the short term is just problematic, because you can't ring a victory bell of any kind with an MQL.
Yeah, you can't buy a lunch or a beer with an MQL, but what you can do is it can be an input to your reportable process as part of your account-based strategy. So that's where we see a lot of companies, and James is, we've done some surveying on this, and in our experience, about 30% of the companies have the model that James is talking about, where they move to the all contact and all opportunity world. However, the other 70% have conditioned their boards to look at MQLs. That's the rub.
Yep.
So you can get them to coexist, or you can, as James mentioned, if you had the 30% model where you're all opportunity. Doesn't matter though. I mean, in either model, you still need personalization. So whatever your Salesforce architecture is, you really need to be personalized in that communication if you're going to get any kind of conversion. Otherwise, we're just moving chairs around on the Titanic from one bucket to the other.
So, well, speaking of, is one of the things we can agree on, personalization is really matters. We can agree that ABM is an effective way of going to market, but it still doesn't always work. And sometimes it seems like it's a team structure / process issue. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, is there an ideal team structure across sales and marketing that makes ABM more effective than not?
Yeah, great question. I would say that in what we see is there's no one size fits all, but where we see weak areas are product marketing around the ICP, the messaging. Product marketing and hiring, especially out on the East Coast of the US, is very challenging skill set. In the Valley, not an issue, but on the East Coast, more challenging. And sales enablement, because now you're talking about companies that are trying to move more up market or move into different markets, and you're having to train salespeople, particularly SDRs or BDRs. If you're not automating that function, you're then having to train them, and training them in a new motion can be pretty challenging. And arming and equipping your salespeople with the right insights can be pretty challenging. So those are the two areas that pretty consistently we see as issues in organizations trying to do ABM successfully.
And if you don't have product marketing in the right place, sort of delivering against this, and you don't have sales enablement fully loaded, ABM isn't going to work.
I would say it would be a tall task to get it to work.
Okay. So, of course, when we started this research, we talked about ABM as let's start with a targeted account list. What are the challenges in just getting there?
Great question. So we see there could be a number of issues that come up there, but one issue can be sales is focused on one thing and marketing's focused on another. So that doesn't help anybody. So getting consistency around that is a real challenge. And not that I want to drop a dime on our sales brethren, because without them, we are not successful. But if marketing goes hat in hand saying, hey, what account should I go focus on next? Typically, the reaction we've seen is sales will give the gristle of the accounts, because they're not going to give up their best accounts. They're going to give up what, hey, I haven't had any luck getting in here. I'll go to marketing because their time is limited and they want to focus on where they think they can succeed. So where that breaks through is if they collaborate, if marketing comes with a data point of view, an informed point of view on perhaps intent data or other mechanisms that could say this is what we think or have a hypothesis, and actually dashboard that out. Like we dashboard that out for our clients to show where we're having success. That's been super helpful to kind of get the dialogue going around which accounts to focus on. It's a process for sure.
Okay. So the research, we keep coming back to intent data and how it's deployed and I'm curious because again, in this research, it's sort of, you saw that sales wasn't able to do it. You talked a little about it before, but I want to double back on that topic and sort of talk about how, in the best case scenario, how is intent data being deployed by some of the clients that you work with?
Yeah, best case scenario is, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. From a marketing perspective, it could help inform or come up with a hypothesis on a target account. It can help, where we've seen it really effective is help with nurturing, so around keywords and keyword topics. From a sales perspective, it's really around the prioritization. If there are a number of accounts that it will really help kind of guide what to do. And that could be in one of two different scenarios. It could be in a scenario where your account-based target is known. So for example, like healthcare in the US is very well known. There's only a certain number of hospitals versus a SaaS company based in Silicon Valley going after a brand new target and maybe unknown. So intent data can really help in both of those scenarios, help prioritize for sales. Where we see a lot less of it is trying to train sales on what exactly a surge score is or aspects of how the sausage gets made. That's where it gets a little bit complex for sales, because all they care about is the conversation and closing and the time of which deal should I work on next. So that's the model that we typically see.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing I'd love to just jump in on that, because something I said earlier, I think really just resonated there. It's that lexicon of terminology between sales and marketing, where I feel like marketers were really good at inventing terms, right? Like, instead of calling something a gifting program, I've heard it described as dimensional marketing, right? So, and if I'm a sales rep, you're rolling your eyes at that point, you're like, what are they talking? So I think there's being able to be on the same page and talk, in sales speak, and hey, we're trying to help expand your opportunity. I'm listening, right?
Interesting. So you're saying that conflict comes in this people and process thing when you're using different language, and marketing is using marketing speak and sales is doing their thing. So in that case, marketing needs to sort of just demarketify their their language. Interesting. And I guess that sort of gets at this overall question of this best practices when aligning a cross-functional team, John, around ABM, and just a couple of tips to sort of get this right.
Yeah, I would say one tip right off the bat would be a standing huddle in and around account-based marketing. And that is usually a cross-functional team: sales, sales ops, marketing, marketing ops. What deals are in the pipeline? What deals need help? What deals don't need help? And that's usually on a bi-weekly or weekly basis. That alone right there could really help a number of companies. There's a bunch of other meetings and a bunch of other research. And in fact, that would be another tip is marketing should or could provide some air cover for sales on some of these target accounts through some account research. And if they can't do that directly, either technology or coming up with a framework to help them with that will help the sales process a lot more. Because when you think about an SDR or a salesperson, especially SDRs, they're very junior in their career, and they're dialing 1,000 people, and they only have that split second to make an impact. If they know exactly what they're trying to do, that's really, really helpful to guide them, because they're spending a lot of other energy doing other things. So those would be two things I'd say. Step one would be the huddle. Step two would be the research.
That's awesome. Okay, that's great. And so it's really about coming together from a people standpoint. We all know what each other are doing. And then from a marketing perspective, how can we really make a difference? Well, give them the information they need at the right time. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to technology with Sonny Dasgupta, who's the head of product marketing at Conversica. So stepping back for a second, Sonny, what were you most surprised about when seeing the results of this research?
Yeah, so a couple of things surprised me. I think the first thing is that the divide between marketing and sales has shifted. We talked about there is alignment on strategy, but there is a massive gap in execution. That was definitely an aha moment, because I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting that there's some gaps in strategy. So to see that, and that the fact that it has moved, that was really an interesting moment, and it gives me the opportunity to kind of, as I plan for my year and content planning and everything, it's a good kind of data point to have. The second thing is that I think that we talked about personalization drop off as you go down the funnel. I mean, you think that the more you interact with a customer, the more you know about them, the more personalization you are going to provide. I mean, that's what you would think. So that was a little surprising that, the more you know the customer, the less personalization you're providing. And one explanation could be, I was thinking why, this is happening. And one explanation could be that once the relationship has been established, once the context is in place, the need of personalization may be slightly different. It may not be as overt, external. It may be more in the context, more covert. That could be one explanation. Or it could be just an execution gap. I mean, you can't just scale personalization manually, because it's just hard to do. And you guys were talking about, it's probably you most likely, a lot of companies are doing this well when it comes to one-to-one. But as soon as you go from one to few, one to many, that's where the problem really is. And then the third thing, I think we all talked about the underuse of intent data. It's James talked about how this is like really, really pure gold, and why wouldn't you be using it? So that was also very surprising for me to see. And I think those are the three key things that I found surprising.
Yeah, in some ways, it's funny, and when I hear about intent data, it feels like the the technology and what it's producing is a little bit ahead of what the people manually can do, and so it feels like scaling personalization is is the issue that this research really points to, and just doing it manually is problematic. They can't keep up. So
That's
I
right.
guess the question is, since we're talking about technology, what is technology going to be able to fix this?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I mean, when you are selling complex solution into large enterprise companies, it's not easy because no single person can simply pull the trigger on a deal um, without consulting with a interconnected matrix of people. And each of these people, each of this stakeholder uh, has their own KPIs, their challenges, their success criteria. And ABM platform is fantastic in giving you that insight. But when it comes to the execution, it falls short, right? So organizations are today, we see that's struggling to use that ABM insight effectively because of that lack of resources. And what's happening because of that execution gap, it's creating fragmentation between marketing and sales, which then leads to missed or lost opportunities, longer sales cycle, and poor customer experience or buying experience, because when it's not personalized, that experience is not enjoyable. So the technology could be used to fill this gap, especially intelligent automation like conversational AI. And I believe conversational AI and ABM coming together, creating conversational ABM was really created. Conversational ABM is really came to existence to bridge that gap and to do it at scale.
So, and there are two thoughts, or actually three thoughts, as you were talking. The first one is this notion of, it feels like this is about augmentation, not replacement. This is about helping humans do their jobs better, and that that the humans are overwhelmed by the intent data, and so wouldn't it be awesome if technology could come along and help them sort of deal with all this intent data, so they don't have to filter it all and figure it out. Uh, and so I think that's what you're talking about with conversational AI. And
Yeah.
what was interesting there is only 39% of the respondents that we've surveyed were, and these are people who are in the market and they are doing ABM, who were familiar with the idea of conversational AI. So there we had an awareness issue, but at the same time, those that were aware, purchase intent was very high. So what did you make of that data? And, why are people, is it, when I talked about augmentation, is that what conversational AI is really helping to do?
Yeah. First of all, you're absolutely right. It is people and technology coming together. That's why we're talking about people, process, technology. So conversational AI is not replacing anybody, but it's really helping deliver that personalization at scale. The meaning I make out of that the 39% respondents who are said that they're not familiar with conversational AI, because it's I think it's a new technology. I mean, conversational AI is a new technology. A lot of companies are still not aware of it, and even people who are aware of it, I mean, we have seen sometimes they're skeptical that if it can be used in a interaction or customer conversation. Customer conversations, as we all know, they're highly nuanced and they're also sensitive. So you have to be careful. But companies who have used it, or somebody or know somebody that have used it, they know the power of conversational AI. In my role, I talk to customers frequently who talk about how it has completely changed their customer engagement strategy and the value that they're getting out of it. So today we're seeing a lot of these leading smart companies, as we call them, in every industry, are trying to get a competitive edge. And conversational AI is one of these technologies that they're looking at to establish that competitive advantage. So it is, yeah, it's a really important technology, and that's why you see that the purchase intent is really high with folks that are that are aware of.
And as I'm thinking about the various macro issues that marketing and sales departments have, which is they can't get enough SDRs. And so all these companies that have aggressive growth goals, the salespeople say, okay, well, or the whoever handles the SDRs, they say, we need more SDRs. And part of what I hear you saying is that conversational AI, that part of it is making them more efficient. So maybe you don't need quite as many. I mean, I don't know. I'm just reading into this data here.
Drew, that's exactly right. I mean, the data is suggesting as soon as you go from, one to few, one to many, that's where the problem begins, that there is, you can't deliver that personalization at scale. That is not to say that SDRs are not important. They're really important, but this technology, these types of technologies kind of helping them to effectively scale, deliver that personalization at scale. And some of these things can be automated today. And we see smart companies are using this technology to deliver that automation and deliver an excellent kind of buying experience for the buying
So
team.
you used this term conversational ABM a second ago, and I'm reminded a little bit of James saying, wait, are we introducing another marketing jargon here thing? But it's okay. What exactly is that?
Yeah. So I joke that conversational ABM is the love child of ABM and conversational AI coming together.
The love child. Well, perfect, because we're talking about the sales and marketing sort of love
Right,
that's
exactly.
happening. So that's what the research suggests. There's a lot more love than there
That's
was.
it.
So conversational
I
AI
love it.
is being born as we speak. Okay, I mean conversational ABM, but
Yeah.
it's
So,
practical. What does that look like?
yeah. So ABM solution is really all about that knowledge and insight about that account, and then the context within that account and what needs to be done. Conversational AI, on the other hand, it's all about execution of that insight, because insight without action is delusion.
Wait, can I quote you? Insight without action is delusion. Okay, yeah, there you go.
But so far, like, conversational AI has mostly been used for lead-based marketing. I mean, and as we see technology maturing, we are seeing tremendous possibilities for conversational AI to be used in ABM initiatives, because it's now can deliver the level of personalization that is needed in an ABM conversation, in an ABM capacity. So when you take that insight from ABM and use that insight to deliver personalized engagement at scale, you have conversational ABM.
Okay, so I'm imagining now, if I'm on 101 heading into the city, I am now going to see the billboard. Insight without action equals delusion. Sonny Dasgupta, Conversica. Boom, there it is. That's your next billboard. James, as you hear the term conversational ABM, is that something as a marketer you say, huh, okay, I'm interested. Tell me more.
Yeah, no, I get it. I understand where Sonny's coming from, and I don't disagree. Could be a little jargony, but I'll definitely run with it. Right? I think that we marketers need to understand each other before we enable sales with it. And yeah, there is a need to if you. What I like about conversation, because I think about marketing all the time as conversational. If my team would roll their eyes and all the times I compare marketing to successfully navigating a cocktail party, right? And that you're not going in there and standing at one side and shouting at people to it's like you'll learn a little bit and you'll learn a little bit more, and so that's what happens, right? When you think about that content problem unfolding, right? Because as you learn, then you're going a little bit deeper and there's more nuance to the next thing you need to say or the next conversation you need to have, right? So I like the give and take aspect of conversation. And AI, yeah, it can allow you to scale, as long as it doesn't become, too Terminator, and if it goes wrong, it could go really wrong as well, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think this is where we're thinking of it as augmentation versus replacement,
Yep.
And so forth. But John, you're in this world every day. So conversational ABM, does that feel like this, as Sonny calls it, a love child? Does that feel like there's going to be, as ABM advances, going to be just part of the conversation?
Yeah, it's a very thoughtful question. And because we've seen our clients deploy with Conversica in this kind of model, I'm a little bit biased to say yes. Yeah, we've already enabled our clients to do that, and we've seen it kind of at close range. So yeah, I definitely think it's out there.
And it's interesting. So Scott, I see a question from one of the audience that says, we have challenges connecting the intent data at the account level with the individual who is doing the research or is in the market. How can we do that better? That sounds like what you just described, isn't it?
Yeah. There could be a couple different options. That could be an option, or depending on the tech stack, for example, if they're using, and I'm just going to name a couple, like 6sense just acquired a company called Slintel, which has a lot of that capability. They have a license to Zoom. Zoom has their intent add-on license. Everything with Zoom's now an add-on, which I've heard from a bunch of our clients. So those could be a couple different options that give intent at the person level as opposed to the account level. Typically what we've done, and we've done this with our demand-based customers, of which, James is a demand-based customer as well. We've looked at more than just the intent at the account. We're looking at the total engagement in that account. So we're looking for other signals, and intent is one of those signals. So if there's enough intent score and other engagement score, it bubbles up to a marketing qualified account. So in and of itself, an egg in a cake is not all that exciting. In and of itself, intent is not all that exciting, but when you put it with all the other ingredients, it tastes pretty good. So that could be another way to look at it, but James may have a point of view on it as well.
Well, and James, do you have a point of view? Because we're running out of time. So, maybe you can bring some pithy insights into those folks who are about to, continue the journey that you're on.
Yeah, no, I think that that's probably the insight, right? That we are all on this journey. I think that your research proves that for the first time in a while, it's a journey worth being on for sales and marketing together. And I, as a marketer, am fully on the lookout for the tools and the processes that help us be more effective as a team. And I don't buy things or think about strategies that only work in marketing. I'm always thinking, how does this work for marketing and sales together?
Cool. I mean, I think as I sort of think about all of this thing and where we've gone is when sales and marketing are working together and they're aiming to personalize, they want to get to this next level of personalization and they want to take advantage of all this data available, it's almost going to be impossible for them to do it manually. I mean, I think that's where we are. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sonny and, bring us home.
Yeah. So, I'm just, in closing, I would say, look, conversational ABM is doing really three things, right? I mean, it helps you engage with your customer. It's accelerating your deal cycle. And it finally helps you deliver an iconic customer experience. And at the end of the day, that's how you get better ROI on your ABM investments, and you get better revenue predictability. I just wanted to close out by thanking everybody. So thank you for joining this session today. Hopefully you learned something that's valuable, and hopefully that will make you slightly better at your work. I also wanted to give the panel speakers and our moderator Drew a big round of applause. Job really well done. I really learned a thing or two just talking to you guys. Two quick things before I close out. The first one is that you can download today's presentation, and there's a link to download the survey report, as you can see here to your left. And the second thing is that we are doing another webinar on the same topic on November 3rd, Conversational ABM, as you can see to your right, where we are going to go a little deeper into conversational ABM. So there's a link here for you to register for that event if you would like to learn more. And with that, thanks everybody, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thanks, Sonny.